And I will also put my phone off. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. We'll begin by offering Mangalacharna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet. Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Vidyantas Tohya Badrani Vidunoti Suhritsatam Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Neshtiki Pancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayan, unto Nara Narayana Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, super soul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his message, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. For my most sincere and humble obeisances into the lotus feet of all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are exactly like desired trees, and are naturally very merciful to the fallen and conditioned souls, are capable of satisfying the desires of all living beings. Hare Krishna. We're continuing with our reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. We're in the first canto, Creation, 12th canto, the birth of Emperor Parikshit, and we are on verse 7. I'll read it. I'll read the verse 3 times and give us a chance to recite it then, if we'd like. Matur garbhagato vira satada bhrigunandana tadarsha purusham kanchid dahyamano stratejasa. Matur garbhagato vira satada bhrigunandana tadarsha purusham kanchid dahyamano stratejasa. Matur garbhagato vira satada bhrigunandana tadarsha purusham kanche dahyamano stratejasa. Would anyone like to read the verse?
Madhurgarbhagato Vira Satada Brunandana Dadarsha Purusham Kanched Dahyamano Shratejasa. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
I can type Prabhu. Matu Garbhagato Vira Satada Bhrugunandana Tadarsha Purusham Kanche Daryamano Stratejasa. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
I can try.
Yeah.
Matur Garbha Gato Vira Sattad Bhrigu Nandana Dadarsha Purusham Kanchid Dayamano Starate Jasa. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. You've got this Surya light reflecting on you like the light of the Bhagavad.
Jai. Jai.
Surya Dev is giving you his blessings to chant the Bhagavad.
Thank you, Prabhuji. And Krishna must be seeing us. So the word for word. Matuhu, mother. Garbha, womb. Kataha, being situated there. Viraha, the great fighter. Saha, child Parikshit. Tada, at that time. Bhrigu Nandana, O son of Bhrigu. Dadarsha, could see. Purusham, the Supreme Lord. Kanchit, as someone else. Dahyamana, suffering from being burned. Astra, the Brahmastra. Tejasa, temperature. The translation and purport are given by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. O son of Bhrigu, Shaunaka, when the child Parikit, the great fighter, was in the womb of his mother, Uttara, and was suffering from the burning heat of the Brahmastra thrown by Ashvatthama, he could observe the Supreme Lord coming to him. Purport. Death generally involves remaining in trance for 7 months. A living being, according to his own action, is allowed to enter into the womb of a mother by the vehicle of a father's semen, and thus he develops his desired body. This is the law of birth in specific bodies according to one's past actions. When he is awake from trance, he feels the inconvenience of being confined within the womb, and thus he wants to come out of it, and sometimes, fortunately, prays to the Lord for such liberation. Maharaja Parikit, while in the womb of his mother, was struck by the Brahmastra, released by Ashvatthama, and he was feeling the burning heat. But because he was a devotee of the Lord at once appeared himself within the womb by his all-powerful energy, and the child could see that someone else had come to save him. Even in that helpless condition, the child Parikit endured the unbearable temperature due to his being a great fighter by nature, and for this reason the word viraha has been used. Matur garbhagato vira statada brigunandana tadarsha purusham kanchit dahyamano stratejasa. O son of Bhrigu, Shaunaka, when the child Parikit, the great fighter, was in the womb of his mother Uttara and was suffering from the burning heat of the Brahmastra thrown by Ashvatthama, he could observe the Lord coming to him. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadah Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Katanchana Smrite Yasmin Dushkaram Sukaram Bhavet Vismrite Viparitam Syat Sri Chaitanyam Namamitam. Panchakalpatarupyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Good morning, dear devotees. It's nice to see you all. That is quite a light. Let's see if we can. Okay. It's nice to see your names. It's nice to be in this space that we've created to read Bhagavatam. It's worth mentioning that the Srimad Bhagavatam was composed for our benefit by sages thousands of years ago who were thinking about our welfare. Before we thought about our own welfare, there were souls that were thinking about it, and this Bhagavatam was composed so that we would have a chance to do what we're doing, which is to sit together and discuss it. Thank you for being present and for giving me a chance to serve this way. Let's begin with the context. We're in the 12th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the previous chapter that we were reading was the Lord's entrance into Dwarka. The Lord entered Dwarka after the Battle of Kurukshetra was won at great cost, and the Bhagavatam is continuing its narrative thread now by discussing something that had happened right at the end of the battle. Ashvatthama was a survivor from the other side of the war, and not accepting the loss, he, in a last-ditch effort to try to have the desires of the opposing party fulfilled, launched a Brahmastra. which Srila Prabhupada says that the modern equivalent would be a nuclear weapon. Different to a nuclear weapon that destroys the bodies of living beings indiscriminately, a Brahmastra is a focused weapon. During the battle of the Mahabharata, we could, even though there were individuals on the side of Duryodhana, like Bhishma Dev and Dronacharya, who were living virtuous lives and they were principled. Actually, it was their principles that bent their arms to their allegiances on the side of Duryodhana's cause. Duryodhana and that group, they were generally for the path of materialism, which is a condensed word that explains pleasure for oneself and one's local interests at the cost of all good. All good would be that which is spiritual, that which benefits everyone by serving Krishna. So if you had just read Bhishma Dev's biography and Dronacharya's biography, you would assume that they were on the side of devotional service, but due to dharmic considerations that are put forth in the Vedas, that they followed their duties and they wound up on the side of irreligion, ultimate irreligion. I do want to have this just for posterity so that the video is not so distracting. Okay. The sun will rise. Pardon me. Okay, I guess we'll just deal with that. And on the Pandava side were 5 not only virtuous brothers, but also pure devotees of Krishna. Their relationship was such that Krishna appeared, he accepted appearance into the world in that family. So they say that Krishna is the most pure. He's most pure because he's uncontaminated by the modes of material nature. He's uncontaminated by a separatist mentality of only benefiting himself. Krishna sees all living beings on the same platform as himself. He sees all living beings with equality. And so they say that he's the most pure. Pavitram, Pavitram, Paramam Bhavam. And he's compared to the sunlight, that even from a tremendous distance, the sunlight can purify dirty bodies of water or dirty things on earth, but itself remain uncontaminated. And when the Lord appears, he naturally turns every place where he is at into a holy place, into a place of residence, into a place that's pure. But Krishna, there was very little to transform, or there was very little to make more pure when considering the family of the Pandavas, when considering Kunti Devi's character, when considering Kunti Devi's heart, and when considering Arjuna's heart, he accepted them as his aunt and his cousin respectively. So we can just imagine what is the nature of these devotees that Krishna feels so comfortable with to accept as his eternal family members. Arjuna, Krishna's bosom friend and cousin, accepted as his wife Subhadra Devi, or we could say that Subhadra Devi accepted as a husband Arjuna, which should alert us and sober us to, we are already Krishna's family by being related to him as children. He says in the Bhagavad Gita that he's the father of all living entities. And so he already takes a position of care and supervision to all of us. But we also know that Krishna reciprocates with the desires of the devotees, and he reciprocated with the desire of Arjuna to be a good friend and cousin. Arjuna's fraternity was such that in his normal state of being, it wasn't difficult for him to imagine that he was, or for him to treat Krishna in that way of fraternity. He apologizes even in the Bhagavad Gita for taking that attitude. When he sees the gamut of Krishna's identity, of the destroyer in the form of time, the supervisor of the material world in the form of Vishnu, of the sustainer of all the planets as his expansion through Shankarshan and Anantadeva, as all of the respectable gurus since time immemorial leading up to him, by the disciplic succession and the parampara and the original guru himself, of the source of all the demigods that control wind, that issue forth water, that regulate temperature, the very digestion within the body, the immovable mountains and the movable mountains. It was alarming. It was startling to Arjuna to be confronted with the numinous the numinous and presence of Krishna on earth, and it jostled his devotional sentiments to see him as a cousin. So in a family of people like this, that the Bhagavatam so far has been following, in a sense that Srimati Kunti Devi opens the Bhagavatam up with her beautiful prayers to Krishna, asking that her thoughts go to him always, as the river Ganges always flows to the sea, of thanking Krishna for protecting her, who was a widow, and her children and even her daughter through difficulties, life and death difficulties, life and death crises, and apparently unwinnable situations. So she thanks Krishna for being there, both for protecting them and for preserving their lives, but also for being present within her consciousness as her only dependable shelter. And in fact, she prays that she doesn't pray that she never be put into difficulties, but in fact that those difficulties happen continuously in her life. So, because more sweet than having a preservation of material goods or a preservation of a material situation is for her the preservation of her identity as dependent on Krishna, and the preservation of Krishna's identity as dependable to her. And that distinction is most clear in moments of difficulty. It's worth pausing for a moment to consider that in comfortable situations, it's very easy for us to identify as enjoyers. That's actually when our feeling of enjoying is most heightened. And for the devotee, that's not a pleasant situation because it's not factual. The devotee does not enjoy independently from Krishna. The devotee's enjoyment, in a sense, you could say, is incomplete without Krishna due to their emotional feelings, while ontologically this is a fact. If we had a choice to disconnect different parts of our body at will, how the quote goes, like I would forget my head if it wasn't attached to me. But if you could, forget your stomach, or if you could forget, would your eating be complete without it? All you would be doing is chewing, but you could technically eat forever because there would be no destination for that food to wind up. And of course, we all know that food has to end up there because that's where the energy is distributed. We don't eat for taste. That's just benefiting one part of the body. So many health problems come when we only consider the taste of food, but we ignore the nutritional value, which is ultimately what the purpose of food is. We can consider it a bonus if food is tasty. That should be out. Of course, we cook things with the intention that it will taste nice for Krishna. But the proper attitude is to be so grateful that our body is being nourished now by something that Krishna has accepted, not that now I'm eating something good. The pure devotee Sanatana Goswami was surviving off just like unsalted, like unsalted foods, and the six Goswamis were eating what separates from milk after you put a catalyzing agent to turn it into yogurt. There's there's like a liquidy runoff, like a yellowish runoff, and they would just be drinking that. So once all the fatty, what we might consider the good stuff of milk is removed, that's what they would remove for their liquid intake. So Krishna sees the world that way, that he includes us all in, he wants to include us the most in his own particular enjoyment. But where the separatist mentality comes from is from us wanting to enjoy independently of everyone else, and especially him. But the devotee doesn't want that to happen. And so in that attitude, she's praying that, you benefit, Krishna, when you enjoy when someone recognizes your position as the greatest shelter. You enjoy when you recognize somebody's depositing of love into you and dependence on you. And so I would rather have that situation than be in a false situation of my pretending to be you without you. And sometimes devotees are given, great opulences, but they always consider that those opulences are keep being given by Krishna for some purpose. Srila Prabhupada said that, if somebody insists on touching your lotus feet, what can you do? You should just think of your guru and the disciplic succession in that way, like perform that as a service. Because it's contradictory sometimes that the more that a devotee becomes surrendered and dependent on Sri Krishna, it seems that the more that sometimes Krishna gives them recognition in the world. But in a materialistic sense, we see that the more recognition that someone gets, it's also, like the more focused on what they want, the more focused on their own self-interest that they become, like the most famous in the world. Like the richest, the richest people certainly have followed some, karmic process. But we know the cost of multinational corporations on the individual and social levels. But for devotees, fame is not won through through selfishness. It's won through selflessness. So it's interesting that it's worth considering how these advanced devotees navigate that kind of recognition. Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, for example, would hide in latrines, which are considered like, the dirtiest of all places. He would hide there so he could chant in peace. Some devotees, take that. They prefer to remain nameless in those situations, and other devotees that for our benefit, accept this recognition so that more people can hear about what their message is, what Krishna's message is. Consider the fame that Srila Prabhupada had, but that he was the guru of the world. I was just watching a video yesterday when someone asked him, do you have a car? Thinking that spirituality is a stereotypical process of asceticism. So they were asking him to kind of catch him in a blunder. So they asked Srila Prabhupada if he had a car, and he said, "Yes, I have many," not even hiding from the fact that he did. And he mentioned that he had just left Germany, where they had more than 12. So Prabhupada wasn't trying to be dishonest or have his claim to fame be a false type of asceticism, but would probably fell on deaf ears. But what he was praising about the process was that we can use everything in Krishna's service. And so the reporter asked, but why do you have, should you have a car to that effect, or why do you have so many cars? And Srila Prabhupada said, I am the guru of the world. Why would I not have a car? I'm the guru of the richest country. That's how he said it. I'm the spiritual master of the richest country. Why would I not have a car? Why would I not have a Rolls Royce or any of these things? So Prabhupada, if you've read, just as an aside, if you've read Srila Prabhupada's books, if you've read through Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita, you would be very hard pressed to find a place where Srila Prabhupada writes I. Srila Prabhupada, so from a literary perspective, Srila Prabhupada is not writing about fiction, because he's writing about documented historical events, and he's also sourcing previous literatures, and he's writing about the world that we live in. His topics include theology, philosophy, ontology. So that generally falls in the category of nonfiction. And nonfiction, for the most part, is about people, and it's somewhere it includes the individual of, well, why did I begin to write it? But you'd be very hard pressed to find I. Srila Prabhupada often uses, the plural form we. We have experience of this. So Prabhupada always considers himself in relation to someone else. And one of the most biographical things that Srila Prabhupada writes is in a purport where he also mentions his Gurudev, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So he'll mention that, by this process, my spiritual master and I both met. So it's very interesting that the most biographical thing that Srila Prabhupada mentions about his life in 70 books, which the majority of them, over 50% of those 70 books, I would say that over 75%, a very small amount or small book, over 75% of those big books are over 100 pages. And it's just from a literary standpoint, it's very telling. You can learn a lot about an author and about how they see themselves by, you know, their use of pronouns in the book, or like when they mention themselves. Srila Prabhupada has mentions himself in relation to his spiritual master, in relationship, and also in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, he mentions himself in relationship to his disciplic succession, in relationship to the Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. And he was at that time, in an existential sense, he was the most merciful personality on earth at the time. I'm not saying that he's the most advanced person on earth, because we can't judge advancement based on external considerations, but at that time on earth, Srila Prabhupada, at an advanced age, was traveling around the world, maintaining a schedule of going to Mangalarti every day, sleeping for 2 hours, translating the message of Krishna, who we are, what our relationship to God is, answering personal letters from his devotees that were trying to apply a generalized philosophy into the day-to-day experiences of what being in the material world is, with patience, with love, and with understanding. And then he was also speaking to world leaders, ambassadors, to priests, to businessmen, to business people, and to aspiring and open-hearted souls that were abandoning the greatest promises of the material world for 11 years. And why 2 hours is relevant is because the majority of us that are sleeping, if we're sleeping 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 hours, that is the amount of time that we have free after that. So some people have 16 hours, they're eating for 3 hours a day, that's 13 hours free, and then they're working for 8 hours, so then it's 4 or 5 hours free, and then they're taking. So Prabhupada was, even while he was getting, massages, he was still dictating letters. The only time that we really had that he wasn't speaking out loud or speaking this purifying message of Krishna consciousness was when he was eating. So I would say that, all of this is to say that an individual of that stature, who had so many material resources at their disposition, when they had a chance to speak, they still spoke about their superiors, about their guru, and about Krishna, about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that was a tangent, because we were just talking about the mood of the devotees. So to get back to the verse, Parikshit Maharaj is appearing in a family of people that are like this. They are the rulers of the whole world, but they see themselves as dependents on Krishna. And Prabhupada once said that and I don't want to misquote, but it was either with 10 or with 100 devotees. I think it was with 100 pure devotees, they could take over the world in a month or something. They could set everything straight. If there were like 100 devotees that were capable of doing what Srila Prabhupada was doing, then, in very little time, they could fix and save the world. So in a last-ditch attempt to, in a sense, preserve the materialistic life for the future, Parikshit Maharaj's life was put into jeopardy by Ashvatthama's Brahmastra. Srila Prabhupada mentions that death generally involves remaining in trance for 7 months. and that a living being, according to his own action, is allowed to enter into the womb of a mother by the vehicle of a father's semen, and thus he develops his desired body. So we know that there are generally two ways of entering the womb, or of taking shelter of a womb in the material world. One way is by Daiva Netrena. Srila Prabhupada mentions that the divine supervision in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And we can see Daiva Netrena more or less as a materialistic process, or a process that's mechanical for the most part. So, I have 100 credits of goodness. I have 500 credits of badness. I have 100 credits of neutrality, and then so my desires in the material world are qualifying me to take shelter in the womb of a living being's body that is compatible with my desires and my nature. And Srila Prabhupada said that if you're so desirous of swimming at your time of death, then nature will grant you the form of a fish so that you can swim to your heart's content. A soul that is very desirous of playing music and of perhaps a great desire for fame, they might do well being put in the womb of a duchess in Austria at a certain time, and then so that the first thing that their parents do is put them in front of a piano, and then that's Mozart. But that's for the most part mechanical, because it's just Yamaraj looking and classifying and categorizing where someone goes. Then the other process is where individuals that are desirous of, like Krishna says, he is the sex that does not go against religious principles. We know that living entities are not created or destroyed at any point in eternity, and so the devotees recognize that all souls are already existing, and that they are not, in fact, creating a soul, but rather providing a context, an atmosphere, or a situation where a soul can continue its spiritual progress. So what they do, so Srila Prabhupada gave to us, a simplified Garbhodana Samskara. A Garbhodana Samskara is in the same way that we clean a room to receive, before we receive an important family member. A Garbhodana Samskara is a way of clearing out our consciousness so that we can receive a soul that is aligned with the highest spiritual prospects. Now, this works both as a mercy to the soul and a mercy to everyone around. In one sense, it's a mercy to a soul because it's in a way a vow that we're making that we will assist in your positive spiritual development. Look, we have Bhagavatam in the house, we have Bhagavad Gita in the house. We're offering everything that we eat to Krishna, and we're trying to perform Krishna's desires here on earth. So Krishna desires that everyone be happy, that everyone be reinstated in their position of servitude, of eternal knowledge and bliss. And this soul, we want you to have a chance to do that too. So it's a mercy in a sense to that soul. His Holiness Jayapataka Swami once said that he would consider it his great fortune to appear on earth again in the house of a family that had Srimad Bhagavatam. So, and then it's also a mercy to the rest of the world to have to have the presence of devotees on earth. We know that the Mahabharata was exactly the result of the opposite, of having in a great place of power and influence a person that was just caring about themselves. So many people require shelter. We require shelter in all points of our existence. Right now, we're accepting the shelter of our material body, but even in regards to that, there are so many considerations. Healthy food, stable shelter, access to education, access to a beneficial social environment. To the degree that an individual cares about other people, they can provide those kinds of things. I mean, good food doesn't happen, in one sense automatically. It requires so many hands throughout the process to bring it. And it also requires time and patience. So much of the shortcomings of food happen because of the shortcuts that people desire to take and to have things more expedient. And so it's a great benefit to other people. And it's in this context that Uttara is sheltering the soul of Parikshit Maharaj. The Srimad Bhagavatam feels like it's worth mentioning Parikshit Maharaj because when Parikshit Maharaj saw within the womb of his mother the thumb-sized form of Vishnu, they say that Krishna himself appeared within the womb to the eyes of Parikshit Maharaj in the size of a thumb. They say that from that moment that Parikshit Maharaj saw Vishnu, he was never satisfied of seeing anything else, and that he dedicated his whole life to seeing Vishnu. So they called him Vishnu Rata, so that he was always looking for him. And just see what Krishna's reciprocity was. Some of us, if we think about the population on earth right now, and we think of the desire, how Krishna reciprocates our desires, see how many people have access to spirituality. So many people have access to spirituality and religion in general. And then first think about the people that don't have access to spirituality, in general, or to not make it general. We'll talk about descriptions about the personality of Godhead. So in some parts of the Lord's name, there's so many different names of God, and those names denote his greatness, or his ability to see others, or his quality of being the first and the last. And then we in the Bhagavatam we get descriptions. The Bhagavatam is full of names of God, and those names of God are connected with his relationships with others. And that book, the Srimad Bhagavatam, or this book, is so voluminous that it's hard to, you have to pay attention to the narrative thread, that it's equally as beneficial to just hear about the names of the devotees, because the devotees are related to the Lord. Like, for example, in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada says that Partha Sarati is a name of Krishna. But Partha is a name for Arjuna. And Srila Prabhupada says that Krishna appreciates being related to his friends, and he appreciates names that relate him to his friends. And we can think about that in our own lives, that if there's somebody that we love so much, and that, one of my good friends, or one of my best friends, his name is Chris, but if they call me, like Chris's friend, it would remind me of my life. It would remind me of my own life, and it would remind me of my relationship with, a friend. And Krishna is like that. When we call him Partha Sarati, he remembers his relationship with Arjuna, and he remembers how much Arjuna loves him and how much he loves Arjuna. And the Mahabharata itself it's telling the story of this Arjuna and of his older brother and of his family. And the Bhagavatam is like that too. It's talking to us about who these devotees that Krishna loves so much are, that Krishna identifies himself in relationship to. And so it's sweet to consider that the Srimad Bhagavatam is the result of Krishna's reciprocating with Parikshit Maharaj. That so much did Parikshit Maharaj want to see Krishna, that Krishna gave to him the Bhagavatam from the lips of a guru like Shukadeva Goswami. When when a soul is desirous of meeting Krishna, Krishna sends to him his representative. And the representative that Krishna sent Parikshit Maharaja Shukadeva Goswami, who's none other than the son of the individual that was in charge of composing the entirety of Vedic literatures, and who had personally assimilated the Bhagavatam from the mouth of that individual. That is Shukadeva Goswami. And that is one of the ways that Krishna reciprocates. So to go over what we've gone over is that Krishna not only protected the body of Parikshit Maharaj within the womb of his mother, Uttara, but he also protected the consciousness and the desire of Parikshit Maharaj by appearing to him in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam, in the form of Krishna's pastimes, and by protecting his consciousness of being in one of the most important times of a person's life, when they're abandoning a body, that for 7 days he had the great mercy to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam directly. And then also to become a guru in himself, and to speak Srimad Brihad Bhagavatamrita to his mother Uttara. I may have gone a little bit over time. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. If anyone has a comment, or if I messed up on one of the details, like the 100 days or 100 devotees, please let me know and forgive me for those mistakes. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Danaraja Prabhuji, Dhanyavad Pranam, Jai Shri Prabhupada. Thank you so much, Prabhu. Prabhuji, I like the way you narrate Srimad Bhagavatam. You have a wonderful vision, and lots and lots of faith, and great love for Srila Prabhupada. We could actually see that, Prabhu. Hope someday we will get a mustard seed of what you have, in our hearts, Prabhu. So very nice, wonderful, Prabhu. So I was just thinking when I would, narrate, verses like you, with a lot of generalization and, the memory and your vision, especially your thoughts, and very nice, Prabhu. You have a very broader vision, and you brought up so many topics into it, like starting from Arjuna, Pandava side, and how Krishna was there, and everything was so nice, Prabhu. And finally you came to the verse and explained it. It was very nice. I have a question, Prabhu, if you're okay to ask. I didn't understand this purport, the first sentence. I have question about that. Death generally involves remaining in trance for 7 months. And the third sentence is saying that when he is awake from the trance, he feels the inconvenience of being confined within the womb, unless he wants to come out of it, and sometimes fortunately prays to the Lord for such liberation. So before, when he was in trance for 7 months, the death, it is said a death, that means that the body will be gone and the soul will be, the gross and subtle bodies will, gross body is left, and the subtle body with the soul, where does it actually remain? I understand that would be in the trance for 7 months, usually general period, but where does the soul, the subtle body along with the soul remains in the trance period? So because the third sentence is saying when he is awake from the trance, he recognizes that he is in the womb of the mother, right? So before that, for 7 months, where would he be?
Thank you first for your praise, Mataji. The association from Portland ISKCON and Jai Satchidananda keep me here is it feels like an IV, a spiritual IV connected my heart. So that's where, and Krishna is nice in how he gives us memory. Regarding your question, I'll let the devotees answer if they'd like. If not, I'll answer to the best of my ability. But I'll open it now to any other devotee that would like to answer. Okay. So to my knowledge, Mataji, Srila Prabhupada wrote that that souls come down into a particle of semen from the grains that an individual is that a male is eating, and that it comes down to earth into the grains from the rains. So I looked this up and I didn't find more specifically on it. So I would say that there's a buffer period between the time that we leave our body, or that we're, generally, we're pulled by the Yamadutas, if not the Vishnudutas. So generally the Yamadutas pull our subtle form from our gross body, and there's really two options there. There's going down to the infernal planetary systems, or there's kind of staying on the same platform. So I'm presuming that in this place where Srila Prabhupada writes that soul is generally in trance, it's for souls that are coming back to the same plane, and so that might take 7 months. The being in the astral form, going in the clouds, going through like the whole water system, coming down into the grains, the process of the grain actually coming out from the earth, being tilled and getting, cooked in some way, and being put into preparation. That might be the 7 months. So I'm just reverse engineering from what I've heard Srila Prabhupada say. What do you think?
Yes, Prabhu. So, see, suppose a soul leaves the body, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then if the soul has to suffer by going to hellish planets, so the soul will be given a suitable body for that yatana body, it is mentioned. And he goes to the hellish planets, and he suffered for whatever the sinful acts he had committed.
Mm-hmm.
And then later he might again come back to this material world by the process you have mentioned, right? Understand the grains, and went in, the man eats, and then in the semen process, it comes to this world. And if he has done any good pious activities that he has to feel happy, he will go to the higher planets and enjoy for that amount of time, and then he will again come back the same process, right?
Yeah.
Then where is the question of being in the trance? When there is no pious activities, there are no bad activities, bad sinful reactions. Then we will go back to we will get perfected, and we will go back to Vaikuntha planet, or Goloka Vrindavan. So there is no point of again being in the trance here, right? So when this is the process, my question is, when does this actually happen? Being in the trance.
Are you asking, does it happen? Well, trance, in the same way that, before when we're sleeping, for example, you could consider that a kind of trance. We're in this same body. I go to bed, and then a few hours later I wake up, and if I don't remember my dreams, it can feel like a trance. So all that I'm taking the word trance to mean is a limbo, a liminal state. So the trance could happen those 7 months in between, going from the water to the grains to coming from and into a particle of semen, being in the male's body again.
So that is after we have suffered for our either suffered or enjoyed for our good and bad pious activity, good and bad activities, or this 7 months period is happening.
Yeah,
process is happening after that.
What I'm getting from what Srila Prabhupada reads is the exact words that he uses: death generally involves remaining in trance for 7 months. Oh, so you're asking, does this happen before or after?
Yeah, because what I explained to you. I mean, when we leave our body, we have to either go back to Godhead, or we have to go back to hellish planets, or we have to go back to higher planets, and then we come back, right? So
Sure.
after all that is happening, I mean, suppose if we are not going to go back to Godhead, then if we have to go to either to hellish planets or to higher planets for enjoyment, once that is done, then this process is going to happen, right? Whatever you explain the process as per Srila Prabhupada, right? That's what I just want to clarify, Prabhu.
According to what Srila Prabhupada explains, it seems to be the case. Why? Because Srila Prabhupada has described that death, it's instantaneously, even while a person is in their gross body, sometimes they're seeing the Yamadutas already, right? So we know that the transition from this body to wherever we go next, that happens in a somewhat conscious state for some people. Sometimes, people leave their bodies in a subtle state, and that's why when they don't know that they've died, that sometimes leads to a person being stuck in that astral form as a ghost, right? So for the most part, when a person is conscientious that they're leaving, or conscious that they're leaving the body, they recognize the Yamadutas doing it. Based on that fact, I would say that these 7 months happen afterwards, before the entering of the shelter of a man.
Okay, Prabhu. Yeah. Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Yeah, I think what Srila Prabhupada is calling trance here, I don't know much about this transitory period, but I think Srila Prabhupada is equating it to, like in other lectures, he calls it, like in some of the Bhagavad Gita lectures about Dehinosmanyatadehe, etc. He talks about it like a state of sleeping. Here, Srila Prabhupada uses the word trance, but I think he's talking about Sushupti, that state of deep sleep versus, the dreaming state or the awakened state or the elevated state of Turiya, etc. So I think that's what Srila Prabhupada is talking about, that initially that the soul is in a state of kind of like Sushupti, in which the consciousness of the soul is not in a necessarily understanding that it's embodied within a jiva, and then the consciousness turns inwards and then subsequently outwards, like Srila Prabhupada saying, then the person becomes aware of the inconvenience of being confined within the womb. So at that point, the jiva is identifying with that body, whereas initially it's in a sleep-like state, not fully aware of its. Like when we go to deep sleep, we're in a state of like kind of being detached from the body, right? So I think that's Srila Prabhupada's use of the word trance. I don't think it's meaning samadhi. I think it's meaning sushupti, the deep sleep, where one's consciousness becomes kind of becomes unembodied. That's my understanding.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
There are areas in Bhagavatam where it talks about these states of consciousness. Like if you go into Canto 6, there's kind of deeper descriptions of these states of consciousness.
Sure, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Any other comments or questions?
Thank you, Danaraja Prabhu. Very, very thanks to your wonderful narration about Kunti Devi and transcending of Krishna consciousness. This is very good lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Mataji.
Anyone else? Yeah, Amarendra Prabhu said the wonderful thing about Parikshit Maharaj is both his appearance and his disappearance are like continuous reminders of Bhagavan Sri Krishna. When you think of Parikshit Maharaj, you cannot help but think of Lord Krishna, and that's his glory as a pure devotee. You know, it's not the focus isn't. Of course, he's very empowered, as this says. Srila Prabhupada, talks about how somebody in this kind of the heat of the Brahmastra normally wouldn't be able to do anything. That's why he's such a quote unquote great fighter. He can, while even in the womb, he's resisting. Glory of Parikshit Maharaj is, he enables others to remember him, remember Lord Krishna. It's kind of like the definitions of Vaishnava that that Lord Chaitanya gives in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So thank you for speaking about such an empowered personality.
Thank you for the invitation, Prabhuji.
For those who want to read, kind of more into this, if you go into the beginning of chapter 4, you will see tremendous glorifications by the sadhus asking Sutta Goswami, why did somebody on whom the entire world depended on and who was in the vigor of his life decided to leave his body? It's really wonderful, and acharyas speak tremendous glorification of Parikshit Maharaj in that situation. And about the practical life lessons that devotees can also acquire. Okay, I think it's 9:08, so we'll end. You've got like a lot of interesting colors and illumination going on there. So we're going to have to mimic this. Okay. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Jai Matai Gaur, Primanandi, Hari Hari.
Hari Hari O.
Join us for temple program today, Sunday feast. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji.